When I first met Cuba in the summer of 1999, we did not get along so well. I was a young woman in my late 20s, and her 40-year-old revolution at the time was in something of a depression. Certainly the fall of the Soviet Union a decade earlier had left the economy in a shambles. But there was also something of a collective psychosocial depression, as citizens reckoned with the rise of capitalist strategies that had long been considered evil to keep the economy afloat. Most notably, these strategies included recentering the long-dormant tourism economy and a dual currency system, where those who had access to hard currency, the Cuban convertible peso, could purchase the most scarce necessities that their peso-holding neighbors had to do without. As a first-year doctoral student at Duke University, I visited Cuba while she was in the midst of luchando, struggling to figure out what the revolution had meant, what it would be in the future, and what it was at that time. As a young Black woman, my body was frequently read as Cuban, which is a boon for an anthropologist who wants the insider's perspective. But it also meant that I was interpreted to not belong in tourist spaces. I was regularly interrogated upon entry to hotels, restaurants, and nightclubs by security, because if I were Cuban, I wouldn't have the means to access those spaces. And since I could afford to be in those spaces, it must be because I was a prostitute, a sex worker, associating with foreigners in order to access their money. Now, this was a difficult and uncomfortable introduction to Cuba for me, but these questions of race, gender, and touristic belonging became central to my first book, Cuban Color in Tourism and La Lucha. As I came to understand Cuba, we began to get along better. To know a place, I believe you have to be in relationship with that place. I fell in love and married there, conceived my daughter, and divorced there. While Cuba experienced a change in leaders from Fidel to Raul Castro, my professional life was also changing in major ways. I received my doctorate, wrote a book, and earned tenure here at the University of Colorado. When Presidents Raul Castro and Barack Obama announced openings in Cuban-US relations in December 2014, everything changed. It was like Cuba had shaken off her depression and was beginning to imagine a future again. Intellectually, I wanted to know how those who had been told they did not belong in the past would fit into this new future. I began a research project focused on women entrepreneurs of African descent who rent rooms to foreign tourists in the new economy. Despite setbacks caused by the current US president's policy decision, the women I interviewed continued to look toward the future with hope. They aspire to give their children the same solid education that they had benefited from under Cuba's socialist system, but they also wanted to give them greater material goods that they could never have imagined in their own youths, like smartphones and cars. Given how frequently interviewees in my previous project had fantasized about life por la yuma, that is, in a foreign, wealthy country, I found it most significant to the question of hope that these Black women imagined this brighter future for their children in Cuba rather than abroad. At the same time that Cuba and I have grown in our relationship with one another in the last 20 years, neither of us is the same as when we first met. With Fidel Castro's death and younger brother Raul having stepped down from the presidency, Cuba is now under a new leader. As Miguel Díaz-Canel tries to forge Cuba's next steps, it remains to be seen whether the country will continue along its socialist revolutionary path. Likewise, I am no longer the same young woman imagined to be a sex worker. As an older woman now, I am regularly recognized as profe, and the mother to a child my Cuban friends have watched grow and change over the years. Still, having just entered my own new decade, as Cuba was when we first met, it's my turn to struggle through the meaning of my life to this point, where I want to be in the future, and who I am right now. Indeed, Cuba's old depression is not unfamiliar to me. But if Cuba has taught me nothing over these 20 years, it is that hay que seguir luchando. You have to keep fighting. Thank you.